Welcome, everybody. Hi, I'm Alexander Akra, and I'm a junior at Menlo School.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm a senior at Menlo Atherton.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm also a senior at Emmett, and I'll be moderating the Q&A, so answering any questions you have about Curieus directly and redirecting any questions specific to Dr. Harris to our Q&A session with her at the end.
Yeah, so welcome to Curieus. Alex and I will be moderating this conversation. So at Curieus, we aim to bridge the opportunity gap in STEM. So we do this by bringing science to underrepresented youth in our after-school programs, and also having events to bring the inspiring stories in STEM and the inspiring nature of STEM to all people, including this event. So Curieus has chapters from coast to coast, as far as Nashville, New York, and now London. And we've impacted over 2,000 students in the past couple of years. And one part of our mission is providing positive role modeling for our students. So this month, we're celebrating Black History Month with pioneering Black leaders in STEM.
So today we have Dr. Odette Harris here with us to kick off our event series. Dr. Harris is the Director of Brain Injury Care and a Professor of Neurosurgery at Stanford. In 2018, she made history when she became America's first Black female tenured professor of neurosurgery. She's won numerous academic, research, and humanitarian awards. In 2019, she was recognized by Forbes and the Ebony magazine Power 100 list as one of the 100 most influential African Americans. She also received the National Medical Fellowships Award for Excellence in Academic Medicine. Thank you, Dr. Harris, for being here today to share your story with the more than 50 viewers and all of the other students that this recording will be shown to.
Hi, good morning. Thank you guys for having me. First of all, congratulations. This is an incredible organization. And I'm honored that you guys asked me to spend this hour with you. So thanks very much. Ready when you are.
Yeah, so let's get right into our first question, which is, what were your upbringing and education like, and how do you think they influenced where you are today?
So great start question. So I am actually an immigrant. I was born in Jamaica, which is this tiny little island that everyone thinks they know everything about, but they really don't. It's not all reggae music and sunshine. It's a developing country. And so it's different than the US for sure. We immigrated, or my sister and I, our family, when I was in grammar school, so I was quite young. And I think that really changes your perspective on life in general when you leave one country, come to another. Everything was different. We speak English, but it's not our first language. It's our national language. So there were nuances in language that had to be contended with, nuances in culture, even school and how we educate people is different. So it was really quite a challenge on so many levels. But I think, it made me sort of have that immigrant mentality. So one, I was really appreciative. I think much more so than you guys. I don't know if you guys or any of you are immigrants, but when you sort of, my kids are not immigrants. And I think that although they're grateful for stuff, I think as an immigrant kid, you're way more grateful for the opportunities that come before you. So I found that I was that much more hungry for these opportunities. And two, it made me naturally a bit of a risk taker. I don't consider myself to be a risk taker in the traditional sense, but I think much more so than I would have been, because now everything you've ever known has changed. So sort of why not was kind of the mentality that I had. And I think those two things really served me well in trying to, as I forged my own career, because I think I held on to those two principles of my upbringing.
Yeah, that's super inspiring to hear. Definitely, I think that the story of immigrants and having overcome all those challenges is super inspiring. So thank you for sharing. So when you were talking about your upbringing and your education and coming to the US and adjusting to different schools, was there anyone who it sparked that interest in STEM, and like what inspired you to go into medicine and neurosurgery in particular?
Yeah. So I think in the grammar school years, I had this really cool teacher who I still actually keep in touch with, believe it or not. And he was my math teacher, and he was a crazy math teacher. I don't know if you guys ever had that, but the kind of person who you were a little bit afraid of, but also in awe of. Anyway, he, I think, was my first sort of experience of being challenged, right? He was like the first teacher. I think I was in middle school, and he sort of was the first guy who it wasn't easy, and I was like, wait a second, oh my goodness, So I think that was sort of the first beginning. And then when I got to high school, I went to single-sex school. I went to an all-girls high school, and the teachers there were also a little bit crazy. We had both nuns and lay teachers, and they were in love with the subjects that they taught. The nuns were like, this one nun who taught us math was just, math was her everything. Like, she was just super excited about it, like super, like almost a fanatic about it. And we did everything, like the math league, the this, and it was infectious, is the word that comes to mind. And I think that when you're taught by people who light up about their subject, it's not a chore. It's, I think you can't help but be inspired. Like my kids sometimes will relay, like one of them has this one teacher who, she'll say, gosh, they live and breathe the subject. And I think teachers like that, when you meet them, it really is inspiring. And so for me, that was kind of what sparked the interest in STEM, to have a series of teachers in high school who just really loved their craft. I think that's what did it for me. And then after that, I was kind of like, I loved it too, because they kind of like inspired that. And I think from then on, that joy and that love of learning that people talk about, and I know teachers kill you with that, like, you have to love learning, but it's true. Don't get burnt out, because it's a long ride, and it's actually so much more fun and so much more meaningful if you love it. And when that was modeled for me, to see middle-aged people who are probably younger than I am now, but at the time they seemed super old, to see them still love what they were teaching was something that I wanted for myself as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for that great response. At Curious, a huge part of our mission is fostering love of learning through role models and education. So we're so glad we can have you here to hopefully, be a role model for a student that's going to be watching this.
Yeah.
So into our next question, we were wondering, so in particular, you're a neurosurgeon, which is, a very unique and demanding career. And we were wondering, what does a day in your life, ignoring COVID, obviously, as a neurosurgeon look like?
So, I first of all, I love my colleagues in neurosurgery, and I know many of you know them, and we all have different lives, right? So there's no typical day. And I actually think that is what makes neurosurgery the best ever, is that, first of all, like, there's no cookie cutter approach to what we do. Some of us specialize in vascular things. Some of us specialize in tumors. Some of us specialize in spine. I specialize in trauma. And for each of us, our day is a little bit different. And then if you choose to go into academics, that's one path. And if you choose to go into private practice, that's another path, excuse me. And all of those paths are equal. It's just what fits you. I am in academic medicine at Stanford. And so for us, it's merging a combination of our clinical duties, which include seeing patients in the clinic and then operating patients in the OR, our research responsibilities. So kind of like, pushing the envelope, figuring out what next, like, how do we make things better for our patients, right? They deserve to have the best experience, and that's going to change. And then we also have a component of teaching, right? So research goes hand in hand with teaching, and that involves things like this, like spending time with you guys and the next generation, and hopefully making you into neurosurgeons, right? Someday, that's my hope. And then also we have, as academics, a commitment to service, right? And so that's a commitment to our communities and a commitment to our patients and a commitment to service. So there's all the things that we hold dear in our portfolio, so to speak. So my day is filled with all of those things. And then you have to make room for your family, right? So a typical day for us starts very, very, very early. Most of us are early risers. Doesn't mean that you have to be an early riser to be a surgeon, but it definitely helps. Our operating room's open for business, ready to go at 7:30, meaning that we have to be in there before 7:30 to be able to start our surgeries at that time. and we have work to do before that. So you can imagine that actually, sorry about that, that defines our day. So if you have a case starting at 7:30 and you have work, you're going to be in the hospital, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And if you need to see other patients, it might push back even further. So we have very early days. And then even though you can plan as best as you can, we never really know for sure when our days are going to come to a conclusion, because what if the surgeries take longer than we expect? What if a patient comes in, et cetera? And then we take call. So that means that, you could be called at any time in the night and the day to be able to respond to patients. And then on the days that we might not be operating, we're in our labs, we're in our offices working on our research, or we're giving lectures and things like that. So it's actually the best job ever for people who like a lot of things and like to put it together in a meaningful way, because we get to kind of do all of it, so it never gets boring. Right? It never gets boring. You can just kind of mix and match your days. And I have to say, no 2 day ever feels the same. It just feels like it's kind of doing all kinds of things. And then I think it would be an incomplete answer to not include the fact that, most of us are married with families. And so we have to kind of, make sure that that is an equal, or at least an equally valued part of our day, if not equal in the time allowed. So, we go home, we try to, some people have family dinner, some people don't. And then I have teenagers like you who don't want to talk to me now, when they were little, it was like, mommy, mommy, mommy. Now it's like, I've got homework, I'm on Zoom, so I think that's kind of funny and fun. But that's like every parent, right? I don't think it's specific to neurosurgeons, but it's enjoyable, but we have full lives. I would say most of us. And we cherish both our private lives and our professional lives. So great question, but no typical day. So, I think that's the beauty of it. We shy away from the 9 to 5 type of mentality.
Yeah, that's so exciting how flexible and diverse the job can be. So we have a sort of follow-up question to that, which is there any one specific part of your job that is your favorite?
Oh, wow. Gosh, that's hard. Because then you might, upset parts of it if you say one or the other. No, just kidding. I actually have to say that I don't have an answer to that, because what I find is that each part makes the other part more valued. So as an example, if you're having a particularly tough time cracking a research issue or question, or you're finding it to be particularly mundane, then you find your clinical life to be so much more exciting when you get to it, right? If you're like, operating on a long case and you're kind of tired or frustrated, then the next day you're in the clinics, you might value that more than you would normally. So I think the combination of it allows for that variability in favor, in which one you favor at the moment.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Definitely all relative, right? I feel like the clinical and the research and the academia parts are so different. And it's great that you can sort of balance all of those along with your family. Yeah, so I was wondering if your life as a doctor, as a neurosurgeon in the hospital every day, how did it change during the pandemic? So we talked about how like your life is, or your career is like ignoring COVID. How has that changed in the past few months?
Yeah. So also another great question. So if you break it apart in terms of the different aspects of my life, they changed in different ways. So the clinical aspect actually did not change tremendously for us. Trauma continued to happen and surgeries continued to happen. How we did those surgeries and how we prepared our patients and our teams for those surgeries did change. So for instance, we now had patients who were when they came in, they were under investigation, right, or under suspicion for COVID. And so if we couldn't clear a COVID test before we operated on them, we then had to wear N95 masks during those surgeries for our own and our team's protection. That was something that we had not done before COVID. In fact, that was reserved for specific infections. To do a whole surgery in an N95 is a complicated endeavor. And so that was different. We're now actually quite used to it, but that was different. We had to think about things like how many people we needed in an operating room because of the value of the PPE, right? And, we're a training hospital. And so we oftentimes do surgeries with many trainees in order to, of course, make sure that we're all well trained and can take care of the next generation of patients. And so that had to be a component as well. I think for our residents, it was probably the hardest because they were already in the hospital 24/7 and already had long days and a heavier load. And now adding to that, they were wearing masks all the times, and masks that were complex and complicated to spend days in, not just minutes, but days. And their workroom and stations are set up for multiple individuals, not just one person. So I think that added to the complexity of their lives as well. So that was difficult. For our research teams, research was suspended initially during COVID. And so that took a big toll on many of us who were trying, had active projects. And we're still rebounding from that hit. But for me, I'm an epidemiologist. Much of my research is in epidemiology. And so that actually allowed my team, they could pivot very quickly and work from home on many of the projects that we were doing. But a lot of our projects are clinical, so we could no longer enroll patients. And so that was complicated. And then the service component, the education component of what we do also took a hit. I think as of March 2020, a lot of my talks were canceled. People tried to pivot to virtual. I hate virtual talks, no offense to you guys. So that actually did change a lot of our international and national outreach and education and lectures and stuff that we normally do as academics. That changed. Even our local lectures and things were also halted. All of our conferences were halted. We've tried some virtual platforms for national conferences, but those are very limited. And so those also took a hit. And then service took a hit also because, we normally would do things like the Boys and Girls Club. We had to pivot how we served that community as well. And then for surgeons like us who might go into schools and, things of that nature to advocate for prevention efforts and, to teach some neuroscience lectures and things, those also took a hit because the schools themselves were no longer allowing us in. And as you know, because you experienced that firsthand. So overall, there were some major changes. Our days were still as long, sadly, because, and understandably, because much of the demand on our time is the patient care, and for trauma that is unpredictable. So, you can't say don't come in because it's after 7 o'clock at night. There's like that keeps happening. So our days continued, and then of course, like everyone else, we suffer from Zoom fatigue because many of our meetings and things have been shifted now to Zoom. So
yeah, that's crazy to hear. I think it really shows our resilience, and especially everyone at the hospital is just resilience, because you talked about how like everyone sort of health doesn't stop for a pandemic, right? So to hear how you and your residents sort of marched on is super exciting to hear. Another question I had was sort of pivoting more into your background and what we're celebrating this month, Black History Month. How do you think your background as a woman of color has shaped your experiences in medicine and in neurosurgery in particular?
Yeah, so I like the way you phrased the question, because I think, first of all, I would even take it back further from medicine. So I liked how you said medicine and then neurosurgery, because I think those are the kind of the natural path. But I would even say that, the interesting thing about that question is that it shapes everything in your life, right? Not just your career choices, but it shapes, who you are. That being said, I think what I would challenge is that it's not just being a person of color. It's like even if you are a white man, who that shapes who you are. It shapes how you see the world. It shapes how you experience the world. And the interesting thing about that question is that you don't know any differently, right? So you're not really sure how it shapes your life and how it, you can kind of theorize that your sensibilities are different, right? And therefore your perspectives are different. But it's truly just, it's the only experience that I know, and it's the only experience that I have. And it is who I am. So I don't know any differently. But I will say that, as I talked about being an immigrant and how that has shaped my sense of risk and my sense of gratitude, I think being a person of color has definitely, has definitely impacted, how I approach my patients. Like I have a broader sense of experiences of individuals because of my own experience. But I would also counter that in saying I only have my own experience, right? So I don't know that I'm a better doctor per se for it. I just think that I have a different perspective. And that's why I think it's important when people think about diversity, equity, and inclusion that they recognize that you're not pushing people away from the table, that you're just inviting other people to the table. Because I would think that my experience is no more valued than your experience. And that's the whole point, right? Is just that we all need to have a voice, because that way we then have more of a comprehensive perspective. The one thing I will say that does differ between me and other people in terms of the uniqueness of my experience is how I am perceived, I think is different. And that's a big issue. And then in turn, how I am treated is different. And that I know is different, right? So, like patients, their ability to trust and invest in me as their caretaker, as a leader of the team, as a leader in the field, those things are impacted by my race and gender for sure in a negative way. And as I was telling someone the other day, like few of my colleagues get challenged in the same way by their patients. And it's subtle, right? It's those sort of like subtle biases that you can pick up because you are a woman or a person of color or sensitive to these issues that the majority doesn't necessarily understand. So little things like, every patient will say, oh, I Googled you and I saw that you went to so-and-so and so-and-so. And I'm like, yes, I am qualified for the job that I hold. Thank you so much. What do you say to that? That's the foundation of that statement, right? That's the bias that they're sort of putting forth, right? My male colleagues, my minority colleagues don't get that question as often. Yes, people Google us, right? But the reasons are different. And then what the takeaway is different, right? So, people might want to see how many cases you have and all the rest of it. For me, it is always this sense of like, oh, you went to a good school, or, oh, you did train. So it's almost that sense of like, are you qualified? Like, are you able to take on this task? And so those are the nuances, I think, that make it a little bit more challenging. But, again, it's the only path I know, right? So you learn to be best, to be the best person you can be, to be the best at your job. And if that's, better than the next person, then so be it. And you learn to not let other people's perspective of you dominate your own perspective of yourself and your own path. Because half of the battle when you're a woman and someone underrepresented in the field is your own sense of confidence and your own ability to forge forward and say, yes, of course I can do this. Like, of course I'm outstanding at this, right? And even if it's an internal voice, like, please let it be heard and hold on to that, because it's important. Because you might not hear it from other people, so you need to hear it from yourself. So even if they think you're crazy, just pretend you have earbuds in and be like, I rock at this, like, I'm going to be awesome. So, and know that you can and that you will, and have that confidence when other people might doubt you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. And that really gets at the heart of like some part of the significance of this event, which is that we're going to be showing the recording, or for the people who are here, to a lot of our students at Curieus who are from underrepresented groups in STEM. So it's definitely important to hear that experience and how to get through it even when there's some obstacles. So following up on that, this is sort of geared at the students and younger people, but if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
So I think that is such a hard question, by the way, because I'm still quite young. I'm in my 20s. No, I'm just kidding. So, I think there are two things I would say to that. One is the one that I tell my kids who like hate when I say this, right? So you might hate it too, but so be it. It's the old, like, I don't even know who to attribute to, but it's the old notion of like, how do you eat an elephant, right? And the answer is like one bite at a time, right? And I think that's really important because at your age, you're looking at a future that's so broad, so massive that it's like, how am I ever going to get there? Like, I have 14-year-olds come into my office and say, I want to be a neurosurgery surgeon. How am I going to get there? And it's like, okay, well, like anything else, it's going to be one step at a time, right? And those steps are going to come in order, right? And, don't freak out. Like, no one expects you to be a 40-something-year-old neurosurgeon. They expect you to be a 14-year-old teenager. So let's figure out those steps. So that's the first piece of advice I have to give to you is don't rush it. Like, life is a marathon, right? Don't rush it, take it in stride, and remember, one step at a time, right? So that's the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice I would give you is to be bold, right? There is nothing harmful in the answer no, right? But you don't know until you ask. And I can't tell you how many times I ask the most outlandish thing and people are like, okay, sure. And I'm like, really? Okay, sure. Yeah, let's go, but nobody asks, right? And again, it's something that my kids are super embarrassed about. Like, I'm in a line and I'm like, okay, let's just go for it. And they're like, but we need to wait. Like, why? Let's ask, like, is this the right place? Is this the right, and I think be bold. Like, the example that comes to mind was like, we were late to this event at an auditorium and there were seats in the front row that were empty. And everybody was like in the back, like standing and trying to figure out where to sit. And I was like, there are free seats up there. And my kids are like, we can't go up there. Like, we can't, like, we're late, like everyone. And I'm like, well, how do you know? And they're like, no, we're not. And I was like, okay. So I walked to the front and I said, is anyone sitting in these seats? And they're like, no, they're all empty. And I was like, okay. And I walked and I sat down and my kids were like, they came and joined me. And I said, people need to learn to ask. Like, never assume, right? Like, if you have a question, just ask. 9 times out of 10, you're gonna get a yes. Yes, you might get a no, but so what? Like, had someone said, no, these seats are taken, then I would have been right back at the back where I started, right? Instead, I got a front row seat to this event because I was bold enough to just say, hey, can I take the seat? Similarly, like the first lab position I got was, I walked into the professor's office and I said, hey, can I work for your lab? And they said, no, we don't do that. Like, you have to apply. Like, people apply. Like, we're famous. Like, this is not how this works. And I said, oh, okay. And I walked out and then they came out and said, wait a second, were you serious? And I said, yeah. And they said, nobody does that. And I said, well, I don't know. I just thought I would ask. And, and a series of conversations evolved from that. And I ended up in the lab, jumped the queue of all the people who were bold enough to say, can I join your lab? Right? They just thought they would wait to be asked and that they would like do the, and I just said, I want to join your lab. Can I join your lab? And it was not the traditional way for sure. Right? But what is the worst thing that could have happened? That he would have said, no, you cannot join my lab, get back in the queue. And I would have said, okay, right? So be bold. So remember, one step at a time, right? And then just be bold, like ask the question. The worst that you can get is no.
Thank you so much. Yeah, those are amazing pieces of advice. And the second one actually really spoke to me in particular. I think like I started Curious a couple years ago, and I remember like just being so down on myself because no one was believing in me. But then I just walked into a local school, like a local Boys and Girls Club, and they like took a chance on me. And that's why we're here today, right? So yeah, I think that's incredible, and that's definitely something that we will share with all of our students and everyone here who's tuning in today. Now I think Emily is going to be guiding us through a Q&A from audience questions. Emily, do you want to ask the first one?
Okay, so we're starting off with a question from Maya Kudabakshian. I would love to hear Dr. Harris's take on the future of neurosurgery, given the recent rise in artificial intelligence in biomedical tech.
Wow, that's awesome. So, I mean, first of all, I think technology is integral to what we do. It's one of the most technologically advanced fields, neurosurgery, surgical fields. everything from non-invasive or minimally invasive surgery to non-invasive techniques to deal with things like cancer, functional neurosurgery to return function in things like epilepsy or movement disorders, thinking Parkinson's and those types of things. All of those things, sorry, one second. Okay. All of those things, you know, I think are on the spectrum of of advanced technology. I don't know how artificial intelligence itself will play into neurosurgery, and I would only guess. I will say though, for what I do, which is trauma neurosurgery, we still struggle quite a bit with those advanced techniques because we're dealing with the acuity of it, and we're also dealing with the compressive nature and the fact that the skull is a closed entity. And so there's very little that we can do other than open the skull and try to get these things out. But it's something that much of us research, and many of us research rather, and are really trying to make sure that technology is utilized in the best way possible. I think the field that utilizes it the most at the moment, in my estimation, is our functional neurosurgery colleagues in their work, which is you know, very non-invasive and very heavily technology dependent, focused on the neuron and the nerve cell itself. So I think they have definitely taken the field very, very forward. And I think next you have our colleagues in tumor and spine who also utilize this technology. And then of course, vascular neurosurgeons are well known for their groundbreaking techniques in endovascular surgery for many of the disorders in the vascular system. So I think all of those are people who are leading the charge in neurosurgery.
Thank you so much. That sounds really exciting. I'm sure we're all excited to see what the future is like. Our next question is from Cecilia Taylor, and she's wondering, can you elaborate on your commitments to service? Is there an organization or school where you spend your time outside of the hospital?
Yeah, actually. So I believe service, and maybe that's also part of my immigrant background. I believe that like a life without service is limited in its joy and sense of fulfillment. And so, you know, I volunteer at my church for sure. And I volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club. I'm on the board of the Boys and Girls Club of the Peninsula, and that's work that I think is just outstanding. So that's one of the reasons why I think you guys rock, because of your partnership with them and inspiring the next generation of kids. And also just the focus that we are all one community, right? Regardless of where we live, regardless of where we go to school. I think that's super, super important. So I definitely put a lot of my efforts into the Boys and Girls Club. I also work with organizations in Jamaica to bring, to sort of bridge the technology divide there. My sister-in-law and my husband are heavily involved, and we're huge supporters of those efforts. That has really expanded in the COVID era, that tech divide, and so we work very closely with them. We work with several organizations, in fact, in the Caribbean to not only the divide for that, but also to provide just basic services in education and healthcare to many in the country. So we work closely with them as well. My kids have had a lot of efforts, and I have tried to support those as well over the years. They've done things like reorganize a homeless shelter to make it more kids friendly, because we forget that kids actually live at homeless shelters as well. They have brought libraries to homeless shelters, which I think has been just an incredible, outstanding accomplishment on their part, that we have supported those efforts as well. And then much of what I do in terms of outreach is in the education realm to really make sure that we foster the next generation of neuroscientists. And I mean that in every shape, size, form that comes. So I serve as a mentor for many high school, college, postdocs, medical students, and residents who are interested in the neurosciences as their path forward. And I do that. I also serve on several education boards to make sure that, you know, issues of equity and inclusion are at the forefront, and also just in making sure that these institutions are available, you know, to everyone, and that that again, like we talked about before, being at the table and sharing and giving a holistic perspective. So I serve on our schools board, and I serve on a college board that I went to, my alma mater. And that's been very, very rewarding. I can go on and on because service is core to our family. And it's more than just writing a check, although that's also important, but it's rolling up your sleeves and being there as well. So something I value. So kudos to you guys for sure. This is very near and dear to me.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, here at Curious, we also really value service education. And as you said, community is everything. So we have two questions that are kind of similar, so we're going to combine them. People are wondering about the more emotional aspect of a job that deals with life and death as a regular occurrence. So could you elaborate a little bit more on what it takes to deal with that?
Can you repeat that 1 second?
So
I'm just responding 1 second. I'm responding to the hospital. Sorry.
okay, no problem.
That's why I missed it. Sorry. And then I'll ask you just to repeat it. Sorry. Go ahead. I'm so sorry.
So people are wondering what it's like to have a job that deals with life and death on a regular basis. Like, how do you handle the emotions? Yeah.
Yeah, what an outstanding question, and actually so appreciated, because I think when we think about jobs, we always sort of look at the upsides and the fanciness of it, and the depth of that question is reflective of the maturity of you guys as an audience. So thank you. It is difficult, right? And I think of all the specialties in medicine, we are one. Obviously, I think oncology is probably the highest. But the surgical subspecialties in neurosurgery, in trauma, and in our neuro-oncology colleagues and our vascular colleagues, the morbidity and the mortality of the diseases that we encounter is significant, and it does take its toll. Someone asked me, when do you think in your career you'll get to the point when you won't care, when it won't matter to you? And I said, hopefully never. And when it does, or if it does, then I'm done. Because it should always care. It should always matter. It's someone's life. It's someone's, family. And I think many of us, most of us actually, and I would even venture to say all of the colleagues that I work with dearly, we all feel that way, that, it should never not matter to us. And so it takes its toll, and we do things to compartmentalize, and we do things to minimize. So, many of us are, we work out, we try to get headspace. We try to carve time out to not think about the gravity of what we do. And I think it's advice that lends itself to whatever path you take in life, right? There are going to be times when it's a little too heavy for you. And you have to cultivate the ability to step aside, process, and move on, but at the same time not move on in a way that is dismissive of the gravity of it all.
Yeah, thank you so much for your answer. That was really inspiring. We're almost out of time, but hopefully we can answer one last question from Victoria. She writes, Dr. Harris is so inspiring. We have seen during COVID how critical the medical experts are to our community. Have you seen an increase in interest in entering the medical fields from young people? Are enough people applying to med school?
Wait, so have I seen an interest in, okay, so one of the great things about medicine is that it's a steady stream. Like, people always, because it's the perfect, I mean, I'm exaggerating, of course, right? It's the perfect field in the marriage of humanitarianism, service, and science, and art to some extent, right? And very few fields can claim that. And so, we have not seen a decline in interest in our field. And there are times when there are upswings in interest throughout history. But in general, medicine is a very stable workforce entry rate, and I think that's because it is, again, just a perfect marriage of those things. And as you get older, like, people want purpose in their lives, right? It's not just like, there's so many jobs that you can do when you're a bright scientist, right? Or a bright student or what have you. But there are a few jobs that you can do in that realm that marry with the service and the compassion and the humanitarian component. And so in the end, I think it wins out for people valuing all of those things. I hope I answered that question. I'm not sure if I got to the crux of it, but hopefully I did.
Yeah, thank you so much for that response. And so that wraps up our Q&A. It's been around 45 minutes, but we were so grateful to have you here, Dr. Harris. Thank you so much for coming and answering all these questions so well. This is going to have a huge impact on everyone who came and everyone we're going to show the recording to. So yeah, just thank you again for coming. And it means a huge deal to everyone.
You guys are amazing. When I sit on this panel and hear these questions and know of the work that you're doing, I'm inspired that, our efforts are definitely making an impact on you guys, and you're making an impact on even kids younger than you. So well done. And we are here for you whenever you need us. That is something that all of us at Stanford hold dear. And if you ever need us, just call on us. This work is very, very valuable. Keep up the good work, and well done.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for taking some time out of your busy morning, even with the hospital texting and everything.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, it just goes to
sure.
show the busyness of your job.
Yeah.
All
right, much gratitude to you guys. Have a great weekend.